Hello everybody, it's Mrs. Pound and we are starting a new chapter today, chapter 5.3 on movement and senses from Purposeful Designs Life Science. Today's section, 531, is going to be about the skeletal system. So our objectives today will be to describe the function of the skeletal system, list and give an example for each of the 4 types of joints, and identify some of the major bones in the skeletal system. So first, what are the functions of the skeletal system? The first is body support. Without our bones, we would just be a big blob of tissue on the floor. And so our skeletal system provides the support. And we can also see that it supports our muscles along with the muscles, provide movement of the body. And also in this chapter, we're going to talk about the nervous system because signals from the nervous system allow us to move as well. It also protects internal organs. Up here, this bone here is the cranium and it protects our brain. We can see the rib cage protects our lungs and our heart and other internal organs. And you can't see it here, but the spinal column is protected by vertebrae. Also, like I said, the third function is that along with the muscles, it allows for movement. The fourth function is storage for the minerals calcium and phosphorus. These are the most abundant minerals in the body, and they are stored in our bones. And the fifth function is the production of blood cells. Your red blood cells only live about 110 days, and so they need to be replaced regularly. The blood cells are produced in the marrow. This is the porous inner core of bone where blood cells are produced, and blood cells are produced in the red bone marrow. So if we take a look at a bone, this is the structure of a bone, and this is a cross section from this area. We have the spongy bone, which contains red marrow. Now, spongy bone is not spongy. It just looks spongy. It has a lot of holes in it, but it is not soft. Yellow marrow contains a lot of fat, but if we look at this cross section here, there are actually blood vessels going through the bone. There's compact bone, which this is the hard part. And in the spongy bone is the red marrow, and here there are blood stem cells that are produced. There are red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets. So this is where your blood is produced within that red marrow. So some major bones in your body. So in your book, you'll see a picture of a skeleton on page 264 with some of the major bones labeled. Looking at this picture, I'm just going to point out a few. It actually has more labeled than we are going to learn, but your skull bone is called your cranium. The jawbone is called the mandible. We also, another important one is the collarbone, the clavicle. Seems like a lot of kids tend to break that one. The shoulder blade is the scapula. The sternum covers the heart. Then there are your ribs. There are vertebrae going up your spinal column. The coccyx is your tailbone. Then in your arm, we have the humerus. So if you hit your funny bone, which isn't very funny, the reason they call it the funny bone is because it hurts, and it's called the humerus. We have the ulna and the radius, which are the lower bones in the arm. Then we have carpals, metacarpals, and phalanges in the hand. So carpal tunnel syndrome has to do with those carpals and a nerve that goes through those. Then the long leg bone is called your femur. Your patella is your kneecap. And then you have your tibia and your fibula, which are leg bones. The tibia is the larger one. Then there are tarsals, metatarsals, and phalanges in your feet. So those are some of the major bones. There are 206 bones in your body. Many of them are in your rib cage, but probably half or over half of your bones are in your hands and your feet because there are a lot of little bones there. So some major ones you should know are definitely your cranium, which is your skull, your ribs, the femur, which is the large bone in your leg, and your pelvis down here, your pelvis. Now, bones are held together by ligaments. Ligaments are the connective tissue that holds bones together at movable joints. I like to remember this. I say that ligaments link bones. The L's go together. And so we see these ligaments right here holding the bones together at the joints. Tendons are the connective tissue that attaches muscles to bones. So right here, this is a tendon, and this tendon is a ruptured tendon. It has been injured. So tendons tie muscle to bone. Ligaments link bones. Tendons tie muscle to bone. So let's take a look at different types of joints. One type of joint is an immovable joint, and these are in your skull bones. Right here, you can see a joint, and over here, you can see a joint in the skull that they have fused together, and they are now immovable. They do not move. Their whole purpose is that during childbirth, they can actually compress together so that the child can go through the birth canal. And so after birth, so if you've ever been told to be careful of a child's soft spot, a baby's soft spot on their skull, that is because these immovable joints have not fused yet, but they will fuse together. Now, there are different types of movable joints, and there's a diagram on your book on page 265 that you can look at. So different types of movable joints are the ball and socket, the pivot, and the hinge. So a ball and socket joint, these are found in your hip and shoulder. And right here, this is the ball and socket. See how this is like a ball? And here is the socket that it moves in. So right here, ball and socket, just like I just showed you, a ball and a socket. Another type of joint is a hinge joint, which is in your knee and your elbow. These are joints that just go back and forth. And so you have that in your knee and your elbow. And so they have the hinge joint labeled here at your knee. Another type of joint is a pivot joint, and you find this in your neck. Pivot joints just go back and forth. And here is a pivot joint labeled. You also have one in your arm because when you go like this back and forth, that is the radius and the ulna, and the radius pivots so that you can move your arm this way, not just this way like a hinge. And then there are gliding joints, which are the vertebrae. They simply glide past one another. You also have a lot of gliding joints in your wrist and your ankle. So our objectives today were to describe the function of the skeletal system, list and give an example for each of the 4 types of joints, and identify some of the major bones in the skeletal system. Don't forget your 5 questions in your notes, and remember to keep watching to answer the questions at the end.